Hi everyone, I'm Linda Reimer, one of the librarians at the Southeast DeMint County Library. Welcome to Library Connections, our weekly readers, viewers, and listeners advisory video cast. And as today is July 3rd, happy 4th of July! Library Connections number 9, hosted by SSCL librarian Linda Reimer. This videocast is being recorded on Thursday, July 2nd, 2020. Jumping right in with the top 5 fiction bestsellers of the week from the New York Times. At number 1, we have 28 Summers by Ellen Hilderbrand. A relationship that started in 1993 between Mallory Blessing and Jake McLeod comes to light while she is on her deathbed and his wife runs for president. At number 2, The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. The lives of twin sisters who run away from a southern black community at age 16 diverge as one returns and the other takes on a different racial identity, but their fates intertwine. At number 3, Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. In a quiet town on the North Carolina coast in 1969, a young woman who survived alone in the marsh becomes a murder suspect. At number 4, The Guardians by John Grisham. Cullen Post, a lawyer and Episcopal minister, antagonizes some ruthless killers when he takes on a wrongful conviction case. Well, that sounds suspenseful. Haven't read that one. But I digress. At number 5, Camino wins, also written by John Grisham. The line between fact and fiction becomes blurred when an author of thrillers is found dead after a hurricane hits Camino Island. And on to the top 5 nonfiction bestsellers for this week. At number 1, The Room Where It Happened by John Bolton. The former National Security Advisor gives his account of the 17 months he spent working for President Trump. At number 2, White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. Historical and cultural analysis on what causes defensive moves by white people and how this inhibits cross-racial dialogue. At number 3, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. A primer for creating a more just and equitable society through identifying and opposing racism. At number 4, Stamped from the Beginning, also by Ibram Kendi. Winner of the 2016 National Book Award for Nonfiction, a look at anti-black racist ideas and their effect on the course of American history. And at number 5, So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo, a look at the contemporary racial landscape of the United States. This week, in celebration of the 244th anniversary of the founding of the United States, our recommended reads all have a Revolutionary War theme. All titles, both fiction and nonfiction, focus on people and events of the American Revolutionary War era. Jumping right in with our first recommended read, this one's a biography. It's called Washington, a Life by Ron Chernow. Biographer Chernow has stated that in writing this book, he wanted to present the real George Washington, warts and all. And indeed, he has done so. Chernow begins the story by noting that when George was born in February of 1732 in Pope's Creek, Virginia, his prospects weren't the best. His father, Augustine Washington Sr., first married Jane Butler, and they had 3 children, including 2 sons, Lawrence and Augustine Jr. Jane subsequently died young, and Augustine remarried to a lady named Mary Ball, with whom he had 6 additional children, the eldest of whom was George. So Washington was a younger son who didn't receive a college education and didn't expect to inherit much from his father. And indeed, when George's father died, when George was only 11, he left the bulk of his property to his 2 eldest sons. So young George became a hard-working surveyor and a soldier who saved his money and bought land whenever he could, as a means towards lifting his station in society and simply becoming a success. In addition to his hard work, 2 other things helped George on his way to success. The first was his shrewd marriage to a wealthy widow named Martha Dandridge Custis, which greatly increased his land and financial holdings. And the second was the unfortunate death of his elder brother Lawrence, who died childless and who left George money and property, including an estate, Mount Vernon. Thus George went from a younger son with limited prospects to a well-known soldier and prosperous planter, becoming first a delegate to the Continental Congress, then Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, after that President General of the Constitutional Convention, and finally, President of the United States. Chernow does a great job of telling the life story of Washington and giving us a look at the flesh and blood man that he was. A man of deep feelings, one with a temper, but also a man who cared deeply about both the army and the country that he led, while also owning slaves. So in the end, we the readers do get a chance to glimpse the father of our country, warts and all. It's an insightful read, and the book won the 2011 Pulitzer Prize for biography. So check it out. Our second recommended read of the week is called Rise to Rebellion. It's a novel by Jeff Shera. Shera offers an engrossing fictional tale chronicling the prominent players and events that caused, shaped, and ultimately won the American Revolution in 2 books. The Rise to Rebellion is the first, and The Glorious Cause is the second. Rise to Rebellion chronicles events that led up to the war. The book opens in 1770 with the Boston Massacre and its aftermath, which sees British Captain Thomas Preston and his soldiers in jail, and follows John Adams and his co-counsel Josiah Quincy as they defend those soldiers who are subsequently acquitted. The story then widens and follows Ben Franklin, who at that time was in London and who was finding the British government hostile and uninterested in hearing the complaints of the colonists. George Washington, the gallant soldier and farmer from Virginia, whose combat experience during the French and Indian War make him the perfect candidate to lead the Continental Army, and, of course, a whole host of other notable individuals that contributed to the eventual success of the American Patriots, including Boston Patriots, Sam Adams and Joseph Warren, Abigail Adams, patriot and partner to her husband John, and 2 prominent Virginians, lawyer Thomas Jefferson and judge and colonial legislator Richard Henry Lee. And if you want to follow Shera's tale through the end of the war, the second and concluding book in the 2-book series is titled The Glorious Cause, as I mentioned, and it follows the cast of characters through the entire war to the end at the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. And on a final recommended read of the week note, I'm going to recommend another book written by Ron Chernow. This is the biography of Alexander Hamilton he wrote, in which he chronicles the extraordinary life of Alexander Hamilton from his humble beginnings, born illegitimate in the West Indies in 1757, through his role as trusted member of George Washington's staff during the Revolution, on to becoming a member of President Washington's cabinet, and then on to his death during a duel with Aaron Burr in 1804. And that's a very brief Cliff Notes version of his life. And as the book Hamilton is the basis for the smash Broadway show, I'm going to leave the description there because you're probably familiar with it. But if you like the show, I recommend you read the book because it too is great. Moving along to our streaming video recommendations of the week, the first one is called 1776. It's available from Amazon Video and on demand. 1776 was a hit Broadway show in the late 60s before it was made into a movie. And the film can be thought of as sort of the Hamilton of its day, as it brought to the attention of the public a man who was much less celebrated than some of his contemporaries, despite the tremendous amount of hard work and effort he contributed to the goal of American independence, and later to the establishment of a stable American republic. And of course that man's name was John Adams, who, by the way, was much less appreciated then, before historians David McCullough and Joseph Ellis had published books that shined a much brighter light on his contributions to our country. Getting back to the film itself, 1776 is a musical which follows John Adams, Abigail Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Ben Franklin during the early days of the summer of 1776 as they worked towards persuading all the members of the Continental Congress to vote in favor of declaring independence from Great Britain. And Abigail Adams is actually seen in musical scenes in John Adams' imagination as to what she would be doing at their farm at home, where the men obviously are in Congress. I first saw this film as a kid when it was shown on TV in the early 70s, and I found it thoroughly engrossing. I love history, but as we all know, it takes a special writer or filmmaker to make history come alive and pull you right into the story. And this film does that. Hats off to the director, cast, and crew. And our next streaming suggestion is related to the previous one in the fact that this also features John Adams. It is the 2008 miniseries John Adams, available on HBO and Amazon Video. The miniseries stars Paul Giamatti as John Adams and Laura Linney as Abigail Adams, and is based on the Pulitzer Prize-winning book of the same name, written by David McCullough. The story opens in 1770, and in as brief of a nutshell as I can make it, the series follows John Adams' life as he defends the British soldiers after the Boston Massacre, becomes a delegate to the Continental Congress, debates in favor of independence within the Congress, passionately so, serves on the committee responsible for drafting the Declaration of Independence, signs the ratified declaration, and once the United States is established, takes a trip across the Atlantic and becomes the first U.S. ambassador to Great Britain and the first U.S. ambassador to Holland, before returning to the United States and serving as George Washington's vice president for 8 years, and capping out his career, he served as second president of the United States for 4 additional years. Unfortunately, he then lost his bid for re-election in the acrimonious election of 1800 between Adams and Thomas Jefferson, which resulted in Thomas Jefferson becoming the 3rd president of the United States. After Adams retired to a quiet farming and reading life, he was treated to 2 huge things: a renewal of his friendship with Thomas Jefferson, which resulted in a lovely correspondence which is definitely worth reading. There is a book of the letters. And he also had gained the great pleasure of seeing his eldest son elected President of the United States in 1824. And that eldest son, of course, was John Quincy Adams. Moving on to our next streaming video recommendation. It's Ken Burns' Thomas Jefferson documentary, available through Amazon Video. Ken Burns' Thomas Jefferson is a 3-hour documentary with an accessible storytelling style that allows viewers to follow the shy, erudite Jefferson as he attends the Continental Congress, pens the Declaration of Independence, becomes governor of Virginia, is sent on a diplomatic mission to France along with Franklin and Adams, becomes the first Secretary of State under George Washington, and the second Vice President of the United States under John Adams, before defeating Adams in the election of 1800 and becoming the 3rd President of the United States. In retirement, Jefferson renewed his friendship with John Adams, founded the University of Virginia, and enjoyed living at his Monticello estate, where he was always working to improve things. And of course, Jefferson and Adams both died on the same day, July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. I can never quite believe that, because if you included that fact in a book of fiction, people would say it's not true to life, but it is true. And I digress again. This documentary is narrated by Ossie Davis and features the voice of Sam Waterston as Thomas Jefferson and Blythe Danner as Martha Jefferson. And if you think you've recently heard the name Blythe Danner, you'd be right. She is an actress that loves her history and also portrayed Abigail Adams in the film 1776. And I'm going to recommend a special video that I don't think is available to stream. It's the History Channel's The Revolution, and I got to give it a special shout out. It might be available to stream if you have a cable subscription. I haven't had cable in more than 15 years as I stream, so I'm not sure about this. But the History Channel's The Revolution is pretty terrific. It's again inspired by the documentary style Ken Burns perfected with his Civil War documentary. Viewers are treated to the story of the American Revolution, hearing from its main participants, from its beginnings through the inauguration of George Washington as the first president of the United States. The series is both informative and entertaining, and I highly recommend it. Once you can place holds through the Southern Tier Library system again, you'll be able to request a copy of it. It is available in the system. Our first audiobook recommendation of the week is 1776, written and read by David McCullough. And this is a different 1776 than the movie that I recommended. This 1776 is a history book that is actually super accessible, and we are talking about an audiobook, but I do have to point out it's short because some people are like, oh, history is so long and boring. Really, this is accessible and it's short. The printed book is less than 300 pages long. It was, of course, written by David McCullough, and it tells the story of a year that was one of the most joyful and harrowing in American history. Readers discover that the months after the battles of Lexington, Concord, and Bunker Hill were no piece of cake for the patriotic colonists. The patriot soldiers, if one can use that term to describe them, were camping near Boston and had very little in the way of food, clothing, or proper training. Sanitation and its cousin disease were major issues, and the camp had the colonial version of a red light district. So when George Washington arrived to take command, he had his work cut out for him. For a short book, McCullough packs quite a bit into this. We encounter the colonial forces and then take a trip across the Atlantic to find out what King George III and British government officials were up to at the same time. And McCullough so skillfully paints a portrait of the times that I'm going to offer a few quotes from the book, courtesy of the New York Times review of the book, which so well sum up his attention to detail and what I describe as the true life humor that shines through the book. For example, Londoner James Fox is described as wearing high-heeled shoes, each of a different color. And he writes of Lord North, the British Prime Minister of the day, that Alexander the Great never gained more in one campaign than the noble lord has lost. He lost an entire continent. And I cannot consent to the bloody consequences of so silly a contest about so silly an object, conducted in the silliest manner, from which we are likely to derive nothing but poverty, disgrace, defeat, and ruin. McCullough goes on to note of General Charles Lee, who was Washington's second in command, that he was referred to by the Iroquois as boiling water for his passionate and short-tempered demeanor. What a great description of Charles Lee, that he was so passionate as to be called boiling water. And you get the idea that the book features true life humor within its historical narrative, so it is a fun listen. The book is a great read, or in this case a listen, and it is meant as a complement to McCullough's longer work on Founding Father John Adams. Our second audiobook recommendation of the week is American Creation, written by Joseph Ellis and read by John Mayer. Historian Joseph Ellis chronicles the events that led to the creation of the United States. We follow the story from the Battle of Lexington and its aftermath to the ratification of the Declaration of Independence by the Second Continental Congress, and more, while also getting a good look at the main players of the era, people that have since become icons in American history, including Ben Franklin, George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton. And Ellis also offers a terrific explanation of how the American democratic form of government was formed and evolved in those early years of the Republic from 1775 through President Jefferson's negotiating for the Louisiana Purchase in 1800. And moving along to our last audiobook recommendation of the week, this is a really cool one. It's called American Rebels: How the Hancock, Adams, and Quincy Families Fanned the Flames of Revolution. It's written by Nina Sestakovich and read by Susie Alphons. Renowned American patriots Josiah Quincy, John Hancock, Dorothy Quincy Hancock, John Adams, and Abigail Smith Adams all grew up in the same small town of Braintree, Massachusetts. Members of these interconnected families transitioned from loyal British subjects to American rebels as events unfolded that led to the American Revolution and later the establishment of the American Republic. They witnessed firsthand the Boston Massacre, the battles of Lexington and Bunker Hill, and the blockade of Boston by the British Navy, and much more. In addition to telling the story of the members of these Massachusetts families, the author weaves into the narrative the threads of events and reasons why they came to believe, that is, the members of the families, that they needed to form a new country in pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, and in a few cases not, as some of the families featured members who were staunchly royalist. All in all, an enlightening book that tells the saga of local families and friends and the major events that unfolded during their lives. Very cool. Moving on to our Odd Duck recommendation of the week. Our Odd Duck recommendation for this week is doing family history research from home, otherwise known as genealogy. There are a whole host of resources that you can access online to help you trace your family tree and add more leaves to it. And two of the best paid subscription resources are Ancestry.com and MyHeritage, and you see their home pages here. Both offer trial subscriptions, but even so, not all of us are plush with extra funds to pay for subscription services. So here are some recommended resources that you can use for free. The number one free service I'm going to recommend is the FamilySearch site, which is hosted by the Mormons and contains tons of information. To use this site, as I said, it's free, but you do have to create an account. So you go to the site, you create an account, and away you go. It took me less than 5 minutes to create an account, create my family tree, input my parents, and then have the information about my paternal and maternal grandparents inputted into my tree, and my maternal great-grandparents. So if you spend a couple of hours with this, you should be able to get your family tree going. Some other resources that are free include the Resources for Genealogists page found on the National Archives website, which offers terrific information as to where you can go to find information in each state. Things like local newspapers, local historical societies, military records, and more. The National Archives site also features census records, just FYI. And also of note, the Ellis Island site for those whose ancestors arrived in the U.S. via Ellis Island, and we see the home pages for both those sites here. And two final recommendations. One is the Southern Tier Library System Genealogy Service Heritage Quest, which is free to card holders throughout the Southern Tier Library System. To find the service, go to our website, ssclibrary.org, click on the digital menu, the online resources link, and then scroll down until you see Heritage Quest and click on that link. You'll be prompted to log in with your library card, and as you can see in the photo at left, that's the homepage that comes up. And you can also search census records through Heritage Quest, which I think is easier than the Census Bureau website, but that's my personal opinion. They've got all the years there right on the site. And at right, you'll have noticed it's got a Google search. If you look really closely, that's a Google book search. And you might want to check out Google Books because they've scanned so many old books that you might just find information on an ancestor or two simply by searching for them. And I have found that to be true. I have searched for my great-grandfather, Thomas Lawrence, who founded the waterworks in the city of Corning, and I found some information on him by doing just a simple Google Books search. And moving on to our cute cat photos of the week. And in looking at this slide, you may wonder about that because only 2 of them are cute cat photos. I'm reminded of whichever TV series it was that had a skit in it where one of these things is not like the others. I don't know which TV show that was. Might have been The Electric Company or Sesame Street. But obviously the photo that is not a cute cat photo in the top right-hand corner shows a beautiful sunset I took looking from just outside Community Bank, looking towards Painted Post one afternoon last fall, and I thought that was a pretty photo. The other 2 photos are indeed of cute cats. The one in the top left-hand corner shows my sleeping beauties, Jules and Piper, on yet another occasion when I couldn't make my bed. And the bottom photo shows you my office assistants one day last week. That's Jules and Winston. If you have questions about this weekly video cast, send me an email. My email address is reimerl@stls.org. That's reimerl@stls.org. And I'll get back to you. Feel free also to call the library, 607-936-3713. Social media. Just a weekly reminder, you can connect with the library and pose questions via social media. The library has pages on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. In relation, each video in this series is available on demand via the library's YouTube page after it has been shown on Facebook. And moving right along to the tech tip of the week. Hi everyone, welcome to the tech tip of the week. I'm going to briefly show you this week how you save a Word document as a PDF file, which you didn't used to be able to do, but it is a feature that Microsoft has added in the last couple of years. So you bring up any Word document that you want to save as a PDF. It can be a new one, which this one is. This is a brochure from a Microsoft template. Or, you can create your own. But once you've got the Word file in front of you and it's the way you want to save it as a PDF, you go to File. And if your computer takes a minute to come up, which this one does with Office sometimes, there we go. I'm going to click Save As. And it's going to basically say, where would you like to save this? You can click Browse if you want to and save the file anywhere on your computer. I'm just going to put it on my desktop, so I'm going to left click on Desktop. And then it says Enter File Name here. So I'm going to just put today's July 1st. Well, we'll see if we can't get it capitalized the right way. July 1st, 2020, just because this is just an example. And you'll notice the default format is Word document. Just to the right of that, there's an arrow. We're going to click that down arrow and choose PDF. All right, now we click Save. And it's going to think about it. And at the top, it will now say, well, it's still going to say Document 1 there, because here is the PDF popping up, which is July 1st, 2020 example. And there's my PDF. So if I needed to send this document as an email attachment or upload it to Dropbox for somebody who, say, doesn't have Microsoft Word on their computer, maybe they have a Mac, that's how you would do it. And if I go back now to the desktop, you should find on the desktop right here, July 1st, 2020 example, PDF. And that is the tech tip of the week. I hope you have a great 4th of July weekend. And that's it for this week. See you next week with another episode of Library Connections.